Amazing to watch French cops take off their helmets. I saw that, and saying we're protesters yesterday. I saw that. I saw that, Stephen. I saw that. Some of them did. I mean, the cops in France fundamentally agree with what the Yellow Jackets are saying. Do you know they're trying to make gas $7 a gallon? That's amazing. The gas in the United States is what? $2 and some change, depending on where you are. I think when I left, I think it was like $2 and some change. And they're trying to make it in France $7 an hour. Now, the argument that Macron is using is, well, we need to do something about this environmental issue. I've said this so many times. I don't think anybody listens to me. And from the standpoint of the left, you better listen to me. If you care about a green energy new deal, you can't start at a green energy new deal. If you're playing chess and you're trying to figure out how to make inroads with the public itself, the green energy new deal is not on the list. Just saying. You can take my lefty card for saying that. Just saying. The green energy card is on the list, but it's not necessarily the thing that you use as a tip of the spear, because if you are in a difficult situation, you don't care about the green energy new deal. If you're paying $7 a gallon for gas, and you're already in economic straps because of austerity, and you recognize that the government's policies is in part why you are in the situation that you're in, and Macron, who's fabulously wealthy, looks great, all of his needs met, doesn't necessarily care if he's paying $7 a gallon for gas, is pushing forward these policies that are attacking workers while giving the wealthy extra money that they didn't necessarily need. And people see that. That's anger. That's righteous indignation. They're not going to care about the environmental circumstances if their living situation is difficult. This is an order of concerns. The order of concerns that is more important to me is the thing that's directly in front of me. It's what I see here. When I am prosecuting the things in my life that I need to deal with, my wife, I think, hates this in the way I think about this stuff, but I think about this stuff almost as absolutes to some degree, because the other stuff doesn't matter if this particular thing isn't covered. You have to cover your bases to some degree, that's true, but in some cases, they're first things that come first. I used to make this argument, stop the pain. Pain clogs and blocks everything else. The pain needs to be stopped before anything else takes place. Meaning, it is true that your world is going to shit. It is true that your planet is burning. All of that stuff is true. It is true that something revolutionary needs to take place from the standpoint of our energy markets and the way that we go about harvesting energy and using that energy, even from the standpoint of how we harvest items and products. All of this stuff needs to be revolutionized. Our world is at stake. But if you're living in a situation where you have a hard time feeding your kid, the fact that the world is at stake is not going to matter to you. It's not going to matter to you. You're not going to care. You may care in this kind of, yeah, somebody should do something about that, but fuck, I need to feed my kid. I'm making a point to you that from a standpoint of order of concerns, the thing that's in front of the individual is going to matter most. The environmental stuff is there. But the environmental stuff gets worked on by going through the economic stuff to alleviate the pain on the population itself. If your population is at a point where it is not necessarily brutalized and starved in an economic way, then they can pop their head above the water and be a little bit okay with dealing with environmental issues when their own individual concerns are not at stake. Just saying. I understand that a lot of lefties are pushing this Green New Deal stuff, and I agree with them completely. You had me at hello. The Green Party is a Green New Deal. Yes, you had me at hello. We need to change the way we organize our system. We need to change that system and organize it around sustainability. Particularly, again, if the planet is at stake. But again, nobody is going to care about it. West Virginia. West Virginia hits 25% poverty for kids. That's an amazing number. That's an amazing and embarrassing stat for a country that is the richest on the planet. West Virginia has provided energy for the entirety of the country, essentially these coal miners who work in these horrendous conditions, getting black lung and all of these other diseases associated with the jobs that they were doing. But they went and did that job, and we profited, meaning the country itself profited from them doing that dirty, nasty job. But they did that job. They did that job because they needed to feed their family, and they needed to feed themselves, and they needed to have a life. Full stop. From their standpoint, it's a job. The dirtiness and the environmental hazard of the job is less relevant. They need to feed their families. 25% poverty. Where did the money go? That wealth went somewhere. And now 95% of the wealth went to the top percent from the standpoint of the entire country, went to the top 1% under Obama. But I'm asking more specifically in West Virginia, where did the money go? How do you have 25% poverty in an area that essentially supplied energy to the nation? That is an amazing thing. That wealth wasn't shared. That wealth was ferreted to the top. And it left the people who were in that country, in that state, in dramatic poverty. And that's just the poverty line. That's not even, not having access to the things that they need and everything else. My point is this. If you are living in West Virginia and you hear somebody saying, we're going to do cap and trade, and this is going to somehow adversely affect your ability to make ends meet and your ability to feed yourselves. If you have a party that is pushing for environmental stuff, you lost them. You've lost them. If there is no economic argument that gets them from point A to point B without starving, you've lost them. In a country, in a state that is 25% poverty from the standpoint of kids, if you're talking about cap and trade, if you're talking about a Green New Deal, and if any of that means that they're going to lose their jobs or the industry that they're using to feed themselves is somehow going to go by the wayside, which it should go by the wayside, you have lost them. This is not about right or wrong. It's about cause and effect. It's order of concerns. From their standpoint, the order of concerns is I need to feed myself, I need to feed my family, I need to support this house, I need to pay for this car, I need to do the shit that people do to have a life. If your argument allows for a leeway from point A to point B, then maybe you haven't lost them. There's a reason that West Virginia vote Republican all as often, because Republicans say climate change doesn't exist. I'm not going to do anything about coal in this particular state. Minus the fact that coal is going to go away anyway. Just saying. I am all for the Green New Deal thing, but there needs to be a little bit of honesty in regards to what effect it's going to have on certain parts of the population. And in that honesty, deal with that. It needs to be dealt with. Don't sweep that shit under the rug. Deal with that. But I'm saying the same thing applies in France. Those people were pissed off that they were trying to raise the fuel tax to the degree of $7 a gallon. I mean, that's fucking amazing. Like, can you imagine that happening in America where they said we're going to raise, we're going to put a tax and fuel is going to go to $7 a gallon? That would be mind-blowing. That would be mind-blowing. The government in France has come out and said, look, we'll push this back for a few days or for a few months. And the protesters, Yellow Jackets, we don't want your crumbs. Oh, I love it. I love it. We don't want your crumbs. Fucking awesome. In fact, I'll just cut this video. Take a look at this. This is fuck, I've gone into my content for this video. I'm gonna have to cut this video. All right, I'll just do this in a separate video. It deserves its own video. So, but I would say this. They're doing God's work. France has a rich history of libertad or whatever they call it, of these French Revolution. These guys protest at the drop of a dime. When my wife and I were there, I think it was farmers that were protesting. They took cows and they put those cows in the middle of the highway in order to stop traffic because they were having concerns dealing with farms. It was fucking phenomenal. I don't know if the violence is counterproductive. I think the violence is to some degree counterproductive. At least up until the point where your interests are being completely ignored. In the Ukraine, the United States was all for this violence. Western powers loved it. Oh, take down the Russian government and all this other stuff, or the Russian backed government of the Ukraine. Back those protests, back that violence, back that coup, back that changeover of an unelected government to take power. Back all of that stuff as it was taking place. But not in France. Seems like what's good for the goose is not necessarily good for the gander. The society that's in the Ukraine that was Russian-backed is evil, in which case it's okay for anything that happens to that particular government and the population that's in that country. Mind you, that incurred a counter-revolution, what the United States particularly hates, but was perfectly okay with the original revolution that took down that government. When the same thing is happening in France, if you remember, the Russian Revolution started over bread. It started over bread. This might have started as a fuel tax. But the righteous indignation that came from a Trump victory, that came from Brexit, that came from Bolsonaro in Brazil, that's sweeping many of these countries. I had a Le Pen government versus a Macron government, essentially a no-win choice between the two things. That righteous indignation, the 5-star movement that won in Italy, is being expressed here. This anger, this setting shit on fire. What have you done so much? What is the thing that's in your society to such a degree where people would do this? And it's still going. Hundreds of thousands of people. Righteous indignation.